Okay, Module 2 discussion. So, number 1, my vision for ethics is summed up in treating others how you want to be treated and loving God above all else. In comparison to the list of major ethical perspectives on page 47, this most lines up with altruism, which is where the standards based on doing what's best or good for others, and somewhat similar to categorical imperative or deontology, which states that the standard is based on the notion that the moral duties should be obeyed without exception. This perspective has a clear right or wrong, or good or bad, the way they said it, and leaves no room for middle ground. So, number 2, my view of ethics has changed over time in a subtle way. So I think with age, experience, and parenting, I've become less rigid about certain things. So although this isn't a major ethical example, it's sort of an example on a smaller scale of other things on a larger scale. So my kids and I, or our family, used to have a rule that we all had dinner time together at the table, and everyone needed to be there and be participating in conversation and helping with cleanup. These are all good and healthy things, of course, for families to do. But the forcing of the thing made it stressful for both kids and parents, and oftentimes did more to separate and create tension, more so than to bring us together as a family. So what I learned from the experience is similar to the saying, straining at gnats but missing the camel, or swallowing the camel. It means that you miss the main point or the big picture when you overemphasize some smaller points. And so it's better to focus on the big picture, or at least the end goal, and kind of analyze, is what we're doing getting us to the end goal? So anyway, number 3. So from the text, it seems to me that the ethics surrounding social media and social networking is a pretty big issue in today's organizations. As the text discusses, there is a lot at stake when considering how an individual member of an organization is representing the organization to the public in social media. I think it's very important to keep your personal social media separate from the one that you would use for your organizational related activities. Also, the text doesn't really discuss it at all, but a big ethical issue that I see currently is around the issues related to working at home. So this brings up many issues for me personally, and I'm thinking about what's right and wrong each day about my work at home situation, often and throughout the day. For example, here's some questions I ask myself, ethical questions, I think. Is it okay for me to fold laundry while I'm listening to a webinar? How about go for a walk while I'm listening to a webinar and participating? I can talk while I walk. Another one, can I count cleaning my bedroom as work time, since when I'm on the Zoom meeting, people are seeing the room behind me and could be distracted by it? So those are just a few examples of issues that have come up since the whole work at home, thing is now huge. All right, number 4. So 5 ethical issues in the case from this case study that were discussed in chapter 2. So the 5 I picked were lying, fraud and deceit, hiding versus divulging information, organizational abuse, and abetting unethical acts. So I'll go through and kind of highlight what I found. So when Merck states that they put patients first, that's a lie. And also would be categorized as fraud and deceit. When they say that the company decisions are driven by what is right for patients, again, a lie, considering what happened in this case study, and fraud and deceit. When Merck's public reputation is based primarily on promoting the positive things, its social responsibility, I would call that deceit, because they're, covering up other things. When the FDA told Merck that it shouldn't use the brochure that it had made because it used old hand-picked data that made Vioxx look safe by omitting data from the recent Vigor study, the brochure hid risks. That's fraud and deceit. Merck advertised Vioxx as safer than competing drugs, even though it carried a 5 times increased risk in heart attack over naproxen. That's fraud and deceit, lying also. Drug reps were forbidden by Merck to discuss cardiac risks with doctors. They were told in an internal memo, do not discuss. That would be organizational abuse. Also, organizational abuse would be when Merck threatened its scientists who questioned Merck's stance on cardiac risks. And the reports by scientists of pressure and threats was, more than just Dr. Singh. So when patients' deaths were deleted from the report, the Vigor report, that's lying. When they deliberately misled and the calculations and conclusions from the report were incorrect, that's fraud and deceit. When the deaths that occurred in the 10th month were not recorded, and then the study was claimed to have only been a 9-month study, that was fraud and deceit. When Merck's own study called Advantage contained tampered with data by the executives, and it took out deaths, that was abetting and unethical acts. Also, when it labeled 3 heart attacks as not as heart attacks, but as unknown causes of death. Also, there's a lot, because boy, that was a mess. So hiding versus divulging information, when the labels said that Vioxx is not a substitute for aspirin for cardiovascular risk prevention. So that was clearly, hiding or not even addressing what the FDA had told them. When they printed the brochure about Vioxx's safety and called it a cardio card, it was misleading, and it also contained hand-picked data, so that's hiding and divulging of information. When the press release came out that said Merck confirms favorable cardiovascular safety profile for Vioxx, also hiding and divulging information. So that some other organizational abuse examples, again with Dr. Singh, when he was asked, he asked Merck for more data and had some concerns, he was then threatened along with other researchers and physicians. For abetting unethical acts, when when Merck's marketing department themselves designed and paid for and carried out a scientific study on Vioxx, that was obviously unethical, and they were going along with Merck's unethical acts. How would I address these issues? So I chose to take a human performance improvement approach, which would have an outside professional organization or group. They would be hired to come in to Merck and evaluate all these things and where they went wrong. So they would look for answers to questions such as, does a code of ethics exist at Merck? You kind of wonder, right? If so, does the code meet acceptable industry standards? Do all the leadership, the employees, the scientists, the drug reps, everyone involved in Merck know what to do if they become aware of a violation of the code of ethics? Do all those who work at Merck and for Merck know how the code of ethics is to be implemented? So an analyst would determine the gaps that exist between official policies that Merck has in place and what the employees' knowledge of those policies, obviously leadership as well. As it seems to me that this is kind of a leadership-led ethical issue here going on. An intervention specialist would then work to close those gaps, performance gaps, between what the policies are and what the employees know about those policies. A change manager will coordinate initiatives for closing the gaps. And then an evaluator would determine if the process had worked. So, in my opinion, the most important thing that would take place under this application or this approach would be that during the process, a performance gap analysis would happen. So this would get to the root cause of how Merck got to the place where it was accepting and tolerating this kind of unethical behavior. That's all. Thanks.